Okay. I think the audio is transmitting. All right, guys, we're going to start the stream in a second. I apologize about yesterday's technical difficulties, but this should resolve them. The computer yesterday crashed that we were mainly using, and we ended up trying to use the Mac, and it just didn't work very well. So give me a couple seconds to let the stream catch up and people join, and we can go over the new Revolts and Bolts and Sparks. Revolts and the Bolts, I guess, that we have, and talk about things coming out and things we're doing on now. Okay, so as you saw yesterday, hopefully maybe some of you saw the stream, some didn't, we came out with a new Revolt and Bolt. The main factor behind this is making the Revolt and Bolt more reliable. We had we kind of got everyone's feedback and got the returns and saw the different issues that we've had with them, and we took that into account when we designed the new ones. Some of the issues we had, people had a hard time soldering the pins. Some people didn't like the pins because if the bolts got bent in the frame, that could cause noise to be transferred because of the hard pins. Some people didn't like soldering the wires, which I can understand because it's a pain in the butt in the middle of the bolt, even though that made it work better. And some people, just didn't. The idea was a good idea. We liked it, but it wasn't the best idea, I guess. I mean, we kind of went a little bit old school here. And brought back the new, the connector that's been used in the past. One of the reasons is because it actually makes it compatible with other ESCs even. So, for example, if you look right here, actually, we have another brand ESC that uses a similar connector. And if you look at this connector, I guess I got to transition. If you look at this connector here, you can see it actually has one less wire because it doesn't have, I believe, probably either current or VBAT. I'm not sure which one. I think it doesn't have a current sensor on it. So basically all we had to do was pull the pins out of this connector that it came with from our connector and put them in this connector. So this connector is actually a little smaller than our connector, but we used, a little X-Acto knife and pulled these pins out and made sure they're put in the proper order, and it even worked for someone else's ESC. We personally think the Bolt's the best way to go. We have the replacement plan. It's by far the most powerful ESC on the market as far as I'm concerned. It's won, lots of first and second place finishes in races recently, and we believe that's because of our FETs. These FETs right here essentially are the most powerful FETs that we could find to put on ESC. This drives more power. It also, the downside is it puts a little bit more noise on there. One thing we did with this is we increased the capacitance. These capacitors are much bigger than the first generation. It had about 600 microfarads of capacitance, and now it has 3,000. So that's a huge bump, and technically you could not use an external capacitor and get away with it if your filtering was okay. But we still recommend using at least one external capacitor. The external ones, the electrolytic, they do a lot better filtering than the ones on here. That's the bottom line. We could, mount it to here, but the thing's huge, and where would we decide to mount it? It would, based on the frame, where would it fit? So by giving you the capacitors, you can put wires on them and just put them just about anywhere. The best place to put them is right on the front pads. You only need one. I put two just as insurance because I usually put them on the arms. If I don't have my quad here, I'd show you, but it really helps out filtering. Any 4-in-1, you should really do it to it. I mean, if I was running this one, I would put one on the back here because there's a lot of electricity flowing through a very small area. So having the little extra filtering just gives it better signal. Again, I recommend the Bolt. We love the Bolt. For 40 bucks, if you destroy one in a crash, it gets replaced. It's the most powerful, should make you the fastest. It's very smooth, and it now, you just plug in one wire into here, you plug in one wire into here, and you can put this stack any way you want. I mean, I prefer to do it like here. Usually, zip tie the wires to the side or like this, and zip tie the wires, to the motor wires to get it out of the way. And then I have a nice mounting surface where I could put a receiver or whatever, and I have protection so nothing can hit it. I recommend you can, depending on the frame, you can put them anywhere in here. There's a reason we made this wire this length. One, any orientation really works. You can put upside down, you can put any other way. But also, if you guys have the version 1 Revolts, I don't want you to have to replace this Revolt. I mean, this Revolt has some changes that make it a little better. But honestly, it's just aimed at making it less susceptible to maybe damage from other components. So really, do you need to get the new one? Not really. If you want the connector to make it real easy to connect, you can. But what you could do is you could just take this connector and just chop the wires, and then you can solder the wires onto the Revolt. So you still get the advantage of not having to deal with soldering on this connector, and at the same time you can use your old Revolts. So there's not really a reason to replace them unless you like the connector. And any one that is being replaced with a replacement plan right now is going to be the new versions. That's the only thing we're shipping. We don't have any old versions. So if you have old bolts and you want to replace them with the replacement plan, and you can get the brand new one. Another big thing we did here is we conformal coated this. It's really well conformal coated. The pads are not conformal coated, but the inside is. The reason we did that is we analyzed, I have some pictures here of just one day. We had a few local guys bring in some replacements the days we were doing some filming. So I said, hey, I'd look at each one of these and take some pictures and see what caused the damage. And I'm going to show you these pictures right now, and I'll show you. We can look at these pictures, and this is a prime example of what's killing these bolts. This one, you can see he used the pins, but when he was soldering, some solder must have splattered from something. And if you look right in the middle of the screen, you can see solder trail right there. So what that's doing is bridging full LiPo into this voltage regulator or something. Maybe that's a ground, and it just fried it. And I think what's actually happening here is maybe when he put it together, that little piece of solder was not in that position. Maybe it was slightly off. And so when he went to fly it, he hit something just right or flipped it or whatever, and it ended up moving and shorting this out. So this is clearly what I'd say is, even if that's what didn't do it, but in this example, I think it clearly did. If you see some solder splatter in here, who knows what else was on there. And he had this, he was carrying this all around. He took it in out of his quads. He flew with it. And the fact that solder splatter was still there even shows that it's pretty good stuck, and that's most likely what fried it. Now, I mean, sometimes they might fry and you look and you can't see what the problem is because maybe it was a piece of solder that fell off, or it was a wet piece of grass, or who knows what. There's a lot of open circuitry in this ESC, and it's all high voltage running through that circuitry. So that easily lets it be fried. I mean, the bottom line is that when you have full LiPo voltage going through an open circuit, if it shorts to anything on that, it's going to fry. So our solution was to conformal coat it. That should protect it so we don't have these problems anymore. I think other ESCs, like you can see the other one we had here, like if you look at the build table from this other brand ESC, they put some shrink tubing on there. And we didn't do that, obviously, because the pins are in the center, but I think this helps protect it. So I always tell people, if they're soldering, cover it in the masking tape even when you're doing your soldering. So you make sure nothing splatters onto it, because a lot of times stuff splatters and you don't even realize it. I'll show you another one. I mean, these are like literally, we got 6 different ones in one day, and all of them we analyzed. This is an example I actually made on a new one. So if you look towards the center of the screen, something like this is death to an ESC. If you see these little hairs, I actually put little hairs on every single wire. These hairs could not be contacting when you first go flying, and then they accidentally touch one of the pads while you're flying, and it takes you right out of the air. So you need to really watch when you solder, look at them, and make sure you have no hairs anywhere touching anything, because again, this is full LiPo going to these motors, and that's going to fry something. That little hair, if it makes contact with the other pad, is going to fry something. And if you look at this picture, you can see every one of these pads is connected, and it's going to short out. Let's go to another example. This was a dead Revolt that someone brought. It just wasn't working. And, again, I'm lucky. When we looked at these, we saw the problem right away. We don't always see them, and it's even harder when we're getting pictures on the internet. These happen to be local, so I could zoom in. I mean, usually I can see them with my eyes pretty clearly. I have pretty good vision, but at least it lets me take a picture and zoom in here and really look at what's happening here. But if you look on the left side of this MCU, and this is what makes everything work, you can see that there are some solder between those pins. And again, I don't know if this was that way when he first started flying or stuff moved or what it is, but I can clearly see solder was in those pins, is in the pins currently. So that caused damage. Rather it was damage over time or damage right away. I couldn't say for sure, but this one definitely had some damage that's being caused because of that. Again, I'll take a quick break and look at any questions. I guess someone asked, is there a schizo version of the new Revolt and Bolt? And yeah, there is. Lumineer has them, or they're going to have them in the next day or so. So you could order the schizo version as well. It is black. Here, I'll put these in the middle and you can see them both. But yeah, there's a black version and then a schizo version. They go together. They both have the connector, you can see. Right there, and that's made, you know, Schizo has his own version as well. So again, what I'm showing you here in these pictures is, you know, soldering's our biggest nightmare. We all make mistakes soldering. We all end up, you know, no matter how great a solderer you are, no one is above flinging some solder. One thing I will tell you that will prevent these soldering mistakes, or at least help with soldering, I found out about this a while ago, and ever since I switched, it's been the greatest thing ever, is buy Kester solder. You can see it's 25 bucks for a roll. That roll is probably going to last most people a lifetime. It is enormous. The size doesn't matter. You can get 60/40 or 63/37. 63/37 actually flows a lot better. It flows better, it hardens better, it doesn't fling. The rosin in the center or whatever the flux is they use is just better. It makes better connections. I've tried lots of solder. This is what I recommend. Just the brand Kester alone, anything that we've used with Kester is the best solder that we've ever tried. It just works. And so that's why I recommend buying this solder. I would throw away whatever solder you have and just switch to this. It's that good. As for temperature, I recommend 750 to 800. Basically, you tin your wire, you tin your pad, you put your wire on your pad, and then you heat it till you see it pull on the pad pull, and just pull it off immediately. As soon as it melts underneath, pull it off immediately. If you do that, you're not going to get extra heat into your solder. The other thing I recommend, if you look at this image here, this is when I soldered. You can see when I'm done soldering, there is gold left on the edges. That means I didn't put too much solder on there. I didn't apply too much heat, most likely. This gold is what you're looking for when you're soldering any connection. If you're completely covering that connection in solder, you use too much solder, which meant you probably use too much heat, which means you have the potential to damage these FETs. Remember, this is a direct connection. It is made to be the best connection we possibly could have for the FETs. That's why they work so well. But something that transmits electricity well also transmits heat well. So keep that in mind when you're soldering, that heat that you're putting into you're putting this connection is going to the FETs. So you want to minimize the amount of time you're heating that pad. And the best way to do that is heat through the wire and use a higher temperature, which kind of is counterintuitive because you think hotter is worse. But the truth is you don't have to hold the heat there very long to melt the solder, and that's why higher heat is better. Just, you know, use your eyes. As soon as you see that solder melt, take the soldering iron off, hold the wire, let it harden for a second, use Kester solder. And I'm going to give you some more examples of some damaged revolts here and bolts. Here's one they gave me, and this is pretty obvious damage. This is obviously some sort of crash damage. Something hit that component and broke it in half. He didn't even realize it. You know, he just thought it went bad. So that's one of the reasons I always invert our bolts. Flat pad on top. It helps protect the inside. Revert the revolts was what I mean. And to avoid this damage. Let's see if I have another one here. Here's another one. This is a good example of, we don't know if this exactly did it, but it shows signs that probably something like that, if not that, did it. If you look at this picture, you can definitely see dirt and grass and everything on there, and you know that stuff's deadly if it shorts two things out, because water doesn't conduct electricity, but the dirt and the stuff in it does. The minerals conduct electricity. But another thing is, you do see a solder ball right here. This solder ball is probably just floating around this board and, you know, randomly shorting things out. Who knows what it would have done. Again, the conformal coating I think is going to help prevent this. And when you're doing your soldering, cover the components with some sort of masking tape, something that just acts as a blanket. I think the person who gave me this said he actually starts putting like a piece of plastic over when he solders, which is fine too, just to prevent this kind of stuff from happening. And our last one, this one's pretty obvious what happened. He ripped the pads off somehow, so that's probably some gnarly crash. Again, that's what caused all this stuff. I mean, boards die. The best thing you can do is do whatever you can do to prevent them from dying, and we're going to do whatever we can do to help prevent boards from dying as well. This is the new Revolt, and I'll show you some of the things we changed on it. One thing we did is put this huge regulator on it now. There's instead of 2 voltage regulators, there's one big one. It's in the bottom right-hand corner here, this big chip. We're hoping that actually prevents, if you get a short for just a millisecond or something, hopefully it can take it. Because what's frying these regulators is a short. So that's hopefully there to take it. We didn't conformal coat this board because it's low voltage. It's 5 volts going through it, so it should be very less. If something bridges, it's most likely it's not going to fry anything. And it just makes it, if we find the conformal coating works well on the Bolt, we'll probably start conformal coating these as well. But we didn't want to, do both things right away in case people don't like it or people have that negative feedback. The other thing is we added TVS diodes. We added TVS diodes on the previous version, but we actually made them larger on this. What that actually does is if your signal wire gets full voltage from the ESC, and some ESCs are way more prone for this than others. If you look at your ESC and you see a voltage pad right next to the signal, like super close, if you crash or do something where it flexes, it could easily touch and put full voltage, full LiPo through one of these pins on the CPU, and that's going to fry it all the time, every time. So the TVS diodes, what they do is when that happens from the signal, these are on the signal wires, it shorts it to ground because it senses higher voltage, and it hopefully dissipates it to the ground. So if it did have a bump and something like that happened, the idea is that that's going to shunt the voltage directly at the ground. We've been testing smaller versions of these on the last Revolt. I mean, technically this is like the 12th revision. We usually are, changing this over time. The only reason we're going to start calling this one the version 3 is because it's a significant change. But we've been, every time every time we can, we do a modification to try and make them more and more bulletproof. So if you have a Revolt dying, it's not a design flaw, but we're trying to prevent normal stuff that's causing issues in the future. So that's one of the reasons we have backup inverters on here and all that kind of stuff. And you can see as we put obviously the connection for the new Bolt on there, which can work with other ESCs as well. So that's the main changes on the Revolt, and that's what we have going here. If you see the Bolt, the main changes on this are the conformal coating. If you look, you can kind of see it looks like there's a coating on there that is obviously going to help with the solder slinging and the grass and the water. Shorting out components, we think that's going to be a huge leap forward to prevent damage to this stuff. Again, we put bigger caps on there. It's like 3,000 instead of 600, which hopefully helps with filtering. And I think what people don't realize caps do, they do 2 functions. One, they do filtering. So if you get noise on the line, and what noise is you have a 3.3 volt signal, and it's like other voltage outside of that, like we didn't mean to send. It helps get rid of those spikes. The other thing a capacitor does too is these FETs are constantly switching. They're switching, 32,000 times a second, or depending on the output speed, all kinds. It depends, but they're switching a lot. So what's happening is every time they switch, they suck voltage, and they turn off, and they switch again, they suck voltage. So the battery can't keep up with that. The batteries aren't made to be super fast power. They're made to be long-lasting power. So what the capacitors do is give an ultra-fast battery, essentially, to all the components on here to prevent the brownout. And the CPUs on here, they use 3 volts as their reference voltage, which means they assume the voltage they're being fed is 3.3 volts. So when that drops, they're still assuming it's 3.3 volts, and they're basing all their readings on that 3.3 volts. So that's why you have errant gyro readings, and that's why you maybe have a noisier quad, or you need more filtering. A big reason for that is the reference voltage isn't staying at even a millisecond level at 3.3 volts all the time. So capacitors act as super fast batteries to prevent that. They're going to suck power when they need it, or they're going to give power when the circuit needs it. So that's why the bigger the capacitors, the better and the more stable your circuit is. So there's no such thing as overkill in capacitors. What we tell people is if you put external capacitors on and when you're done flying, that capacitor's hot, that means it was working really hard. So put more capacitors. If the capacitors are cool when you're flying, you have the right amount of capacitors. Now, like we can filter this stuff through software, but a capacitor is a zero loss of information filter. That means that it doesn't interfere with our gyro readings whatsoever. It doesn't make us lose any good readings. So it's by far the best filter you can put on your quad. The less filtering you do, the more filtering you do through hardware, the less filtering you have to do through software, and software isn't as good at filtering as hardware is. You know, Betaflight filters, for example, they use notch filters and low pass, and their automatic filters sets the notch filters automatically. And what that does is it actually strips every bit of information at that frequency. It takes it off. The problem is when you're hitting prop wash and other things, we need the information at that frequency, which is why we don't use those type of filters. But what's nice is if you're using capacitors, maybe you don't need to filter at that frequency or anything at all, because the capacitor's taking away all that voltage, that noise on the line. So that's why, you know, people are against capacitors. It's silly. You can tell if a capacitor's working. If it's getting warm, you needed it. And as equipment breaks down over time, as circuits break out over time, they need it more and more. And basically all a capacitor is going to do is keep your stuff lasting longer, working better. The only downside is some people think they're ugly, but I would rather have a slightly ugly bump on my quad and know it works the best it can than not have a capacitor. Are they absolutely needed? No, we can filter out that stuff. You can raise your filters, but you should use them. I mean, it's the best filtering you possibly can get. The new Bolt ships with, we found 22 microfarad capacitors, 2200 microfarad capacitors that are the same size as our 1000 microfarad capacitors. So we're like, yeah, let's put those in there. So we put massive capacitors in there. You really only need one. Why I like putting two on there because I have OCD and like seeing one on each arm. But yeah, the best place to put them is on the front pads of here, and then just put them on a wire. Don't use that tin connector. Cut it down to like, you know, 1 millimeter or 2, and then solder a thicker wire on there and use that wire. And the shorter the wire, the better they're going to work. But you don't have to go crazy short. So just, you know, keep it a couple inches long. It has the connector, obviously, you can put on there, so you don't have to worry about soldering these pins in the middle. You do not need the pins in the middle. We just left them there in case some people still like them. I don't want to take them away from them. We're eventually going to have a really high, you know, we're going way past this ESC in our next generation that's going to blow minds. You know, megahertz speeds, and they all interact and talk to each other, all the ESCs, and we can eliminate all desyncs and everything else. That's what we're testing now, but it's not ready for the market yet. So when that comes out, we're probably going to end up dropping the pins, but this will get you used to, you know, this is the next step. So you can use the connector, and hopefully everyone likes it and doesn't want to keep using the pins, and then we don't even need to put them on there anymore. But this is the, you know, we're always going to be testing the next generation. If we're releasing something, you can bet we've already started working on the next generation, because we want to make sure, you know, Raceflight is the most advanced software and hardware out there. Our ESCs have the most powerful FETs. Our flight controller has the least noisy and bus for our gyro, and the best mounting for what we consider the best gyro on the market. There's only one we know of that's better, and it's just terribly expensive. So this is by far the best gyro we can get without going crazy expensive. Our next board, we are coming out with an OSD board in the near future, but it's not here yet. And that one we may consider using the new gyro on, but probably not, because it's just more expensive than you, and you guys won't get the benefits of a teeny bit better gyro for the price it is. Again, we conformal coded this, and I think that about covers it. I guess let's see if we have any questions I can answer. The one we use is actually a Chinese brand. I don't think it's very easy to get. We don't get it from the places here. We actually talked to a company in China and got it found it for us. So I can't even tell you what the brand is, to be honest, because we've tested so many. We have a capacitance meter, and we measure the ESR of all of them, and we measure the which is the resistance, and we measure, you know, what they rate at, which is 2200 microfarads. So it was by far the best. We can make them available on our site soon. I mean, the ones we have are great too. I mean, you know, the 1000 is FM series. There's nothing better than the Panasonic FM series in terms of resistance. But this one was almost as good a resistance, but way higher. So we decided to go with that one. OSD isn't a priority because we are prioritizing right now flight code. if you have tried the betas now, I don't know if you guys know what's going on, but we've had automatic filtering for a while. The setting you set for the filter is just the aggression level. So it's how automatic it filters. It really, we could leave it at one filter and hide it from you guys, one setting, and it would probably work for just about everyone. But some people want that, they build a really clean build, and they want the automatic filter not to be aggressive. Our filter does not lose information. It's a very intelligent filter. I don't even like to use the word filter, but basically it does pattern analysis, it does predictive analysis, and it tries to decide if the reading it got is the right reading, and if it's the wrong reading, how much it's off by. So we're not eliminating anything at any frequency. We get all the information, and we actually throw away only the information that's bad. We have another version of a Revolt coming soon with an OSD, which is more of a priority. But right now, the priority is flight code. We didn't spend the time working on the OSD because we want to put the entire configurator in the OSD. We want you to be able to flash ESCs. We want you to be able to do everything in the OSD. That's going to be ready, and we're testing that now. So it's going to be ready soon, but I don't know if you guys have tried the new betas, not the release candidates, but we're actually working on automatic eye. Eye is what's causing your prop wash. Eye is also what is causing sometimes you get drift and other things like that. If we can get this, we have this eye table that basically has long-term eye, and it sets eye at different frequencies, at different times, at different throttle levels, at different. So essentially, it can collect information like your car does at different things, and eventually set it all perfectly for you, so you're not even adjusting eye. We're experimenting with automatically adjusting D now too. D, we're pretty sure there's going to be no need for you guys to tune it. P is kind of a feel thing, so you're going to end up just being able to only tune P is what's coming. P, you can make it, that's what makes it stiffer, or respond harder, or sharper, and the D and the I just need to adjust to the P, because all the tuning you're doing is you're setting your P and then you're adjusting your D to match to your P. We're going to do a tuning live stream sometime soon, and I'll show you exactly how you do that before we come out the automatic stuff. But P is super easy, or D is super easy to adjust, because it just is the inverse of P, but slightly less, more or less. So that's going to be easy for us to automate. This I stuff we're working with, it's been working pretty good. People are liking it, but there's, it still needs some work. We need to do a lot of testing and experimentation to get it perfect. But that's what we chose to concentrate on. Gil won second. We had another person run a race fight, and a Bolt won first in this last multi-GP event. There's some other events I can't talk about that, Race Light Team won. We're concentrating on the best flying performance over the OSD right now. That's what sets us apart. I mean, we've had some, freestyle guys have tested other things, and they've strayed, and now they're all coming back to race flight because they're realizing their video doesn't look as good. It may have a different feeling, is kind of how I describe it, but it's not having a better feeling. It's not having better output, better video. And when you're a freestyle guy, what do you care about most? You want your video to look as good as possible, and that's basically what's happening. Is it's not looking the best it can look. Let me see if there's any other questions. But the OSD's coming. Another one's coming with an OSD on it. It's going to have some other changes that are going to be surprises too. It's going to be slightly more expensive than this one. We're going to keep selling this one because this is the one like that people want. That's bare bones, made for racing. Doesn't have a ton of stuff on it. We want the best, most high performance, stable thing for the guys that don't want the OSD. But we're going to add the OSD options as well. Let me see if there's any other questions I can. They asked, can it take 6S? Yes. DR1, we just had over almost, I think 4/5 of the team were running bolts. At the last DR1, there was a bunch of races they're going to talk about. They're going to show them to you. But they were all running bolts on 6S. As far as I know, we didn't have any die of actual flying, just break down on their own. I mean, they hit huge boulders and things like that and destroyed them, but nothing. The physical damage was the only thing that really took him out. There was no deaths from 6S. I was actually running 6S full throttle runs on the Bolt on our 2900 kV motors, which is crazy. Basically the batteries were exploding, but the Bolt took it like a champ, full throttle. I mean, the amount of amps I was pulling is just insane. They can't even, the Bolt couldn't even measure it because of the size resistor we have on there, but it was off the chart. I mean, it was more than 200 amps, and the Bolt took it no issues whatsoever. So the FETs are very impressive. They can take a lot of power. So 6S is not an issue. at all. 20 by 20 setups, we have the same millivolt and spark, but we have a new one coming of those as well that will have a quick connector as well. This was the first one to roll out. This was the first one ready. We pushed really hard to get it before the Chinese holiday, and it came out. Again, the performance is the same on these. I mean, if you took your old bolt, put some conformal coating on it, and used wires, you're going to get the exact same performance. This is just aimed at making it more bulletproof, making it work a little better. You know, you don't have to rush out and throw yours in the trash, because they're the same performance. These are durability and easeability things. Make it faster and easier to build a quad, essentially. And the OSD is going to be on the new Revolt coming out. So the Bolt is there's going to be a deluxe version, essentially, with more stuff. Going to have a different CPU, hopefully, and some other things that we're testing. And I don't really want to give the details because I can't say for sure, because we actually have them here. We're testing them. If this run goes good, then, you know, probably in a month we're going to have them ready to sell, maybe shorter. If it doesn't, we need to do another prototype run. That's the way it is. I mean, the prototype run takes 2 weeks if we have to make changes. We're actually experimenting with all-in-ones, but our all-in-one's not going to be released till our new ESC firmware that we're working on and firmware technology comes out. Because with these, it's too easy to fry the ESC. Everyone's fried their ESC. So if we did an all-in-one right now with the current BL Heli and BL Heli 32 technology, it's not going to prevent the ESC from frying or frying your motors. With our new stuff, since all the ESCs can communicate, they know if the motors are stuck, they know the RPM on the motors, they know if they're hitting prop wires, they know all kinds of crazy stuff like that. We believe we can make it really solid where the ESC is going to die. I mean, basically, your FETs might die over time from use, but it's not going to die prematurely. So when we have that technology perfect, then we can talk about an all-in-one, because you're not going to have to throw those in the trash. I mean, right now, it's a travesty. Your ESC dies and your board dies. You're replacing a pretty expensive piece of hardware. Putting them together on one board doesn't make them much cheaper. I mean, essentially, all we're doing is putting all the same components on one board, so it's the same cost, more or less. So we need to make sure we get that to the point where it's more bulletproof before we put everything together. Someone asked if I recommend cleaning the board with alcohol and a toothbrush after. I don't really do that. I don't get much flux on it, so I've never had the need to. If you're getting a lot of flux on it, you're probably using the wrong solder. So I would try and use Kester solder, and I bet you won't find the need to clean it. If you do, I don't think it'll hurt it. Just make sure it dries well. Someone asked about shipping. Yeah, we're shipping these currently. Anything we're shipping now is the new stuff. Let me see if I see any other questions. I'm kind of going through them now. I'm watching all the ones, if you guys are wondering. The new Bolt rating, I mean, honestly, it's probably 60 amps, maybe more. We're not sitting there saying it's 60 amps, but like I said, I was running well over 200 amps through it. So there's no ESC that can compete with it. So don't worry about, like, I have yet to see anyone put a 6-cell motor combination that has killed it. So I don't think you have any worry to worry about the power regulation. Read some other comments. I guess some other things I'll go over right now too. One thing we recommend is, so if you guys are having any yaw spins have been, as far as we're concerned, completely eliminated. I'll put some videos up just bashing through things and never having ever a yaw spin, no matter what I do. If you are having some yaw spins, there are some settings you can do to tune it. But more than likely, your ESC is causing something to not recover from the yaw spins. Make sure you're running reverse props. Everything's tuned for reverse props. They fly better. They don't fling stuff on your camera. And maybe try a different ESC if you're having yaw spins. If you're having yaw spins with a Bolt, maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe your props are too big, or the props are getting stuffed, getting caught. But I haven't seen a yaw spin on one of our quads in a very long time in any of the later betas. Make sure, if you're having yaw spins, update, of course, and maybe you're overtuned even. But the yaw spin thing, basically what it does is it detects the quad spinning, and when it does, it spins down the motors and then spins them all back up. Because what's happening with the yaw spin is one of the ESCs is desyncing, and the other 3 don't know it because we have no telemetry, and that causes yaw spin. So by stopping them all, it gives them a chance to all start as one in unison and start together. So you might find like it might drop not even a foot, but it might drop a little. But it's going to happen so fast it's going to spin back up and remove the desyncs. The only thing we can do to fix a yaw spin completely is have the ESCs communicate. So if the ESCs eventually are communicating, that's why we're going to 4-in-1s, because 4-in-1s are the future because they can all communicate on a high-speed bus. So when one desyncs, it knows it's not spinning because it has telemetry. Hey, it knows it's not sucking power, or the props aren't spinning. It can notify all the other ones. They can slow down, let that one ramp back up, and get rid of the yaw spin. It'll also get rid of desyncs as well, doing the same thing, because it can happen so fast because they're communicating on this high-speed bus, an SPI bus all the CPUs are communicating on. It'll be completely unnoticeable. So that's really the future. We try to work with BL-Heli32, and this is the kind of stuff we wanted to see them in there. Of course, we wanted the automatic updates, and we wanted them to easily change the settings and all this other stuff. They didn't seem very amenable to it. We don't want to have to do everything ourselves. I would love to just, pay someone a small amount per ESC, flash their ESC, and it work amazing. But the bottom line is the BL-32, while it maybe flies slightly better, it does not work better. We lose a lot of features with it. So it's better if we're making it. We actually partnered with a company that has been doing ESCs for a long time, and they had the basis for our new ESCs done, and then we could go in there and make it way better, and that's what we ended up doing. It's of course 32-bit and all that good stuff, but that's not the things that are going to make it way better. We're testing them down there. Great. This Bolt right now is the best technology out there. This has the best FETs. It works really well. I recommend using this one until our other stuff's ready. I mean, it's amazing. I think we fixed all the issues people have had. Knock on wood, most of them are maybe gone if there's no problem. So let me see if there's any other questions I'm missing. Someone's asking about the motor test. The motor tests are there to troubleshoot your quad. Like, don't use the motor test and be like, oh my God, my motors are at 5,000. If it's flying good, don't worry about it. But if you have an issue with your quad, it's not flying very well, you use the motor test and you see which one of those ESCs is just way off. If one of them's 10,000 and all the rest are 3,000, that motor is probably damaged, or maybe that ESC is damaged. It's one or the other. You can switch the motor to another one and see if it follows the motor, see if it's the ESC. That's probably causing your noise issues and your problems and everything else. Again, you do a motor test that's really high, you add some capacitors, the motor test is probably going to lower, because what the motor test is doing right now is it's using the accelerometer to see how noisy everything is. The higher the number, the noisier it is. So bigger motors, they're going to be noisier. Smaller motors are going to be less noisy. Better bearings are going to be less noisy. Worse bearings are going to be more noisy. More beat up motors are going to be more noisy. So there's not a hard, fast rule on what that number is. But that number you use to diagnose when you have issues with your hardware. You can't figure out how to tune that thing. You can't figure out how to have mid-throttle oscillations and they won't go away. You use that to figure out, hey, like this one's way higher than all the rest. I need to figure out what's wrong with that. Maybe it's the ESC, maybe it's the motor. Let's try another motor and see if my problems get better. Let's try some capacitors and see if my motors get better and my motor tests get better. Like, that's really the goal of the motor test. It's not to say these motors are worse than the others. I mean, the reason we made the motor tests is because we got one of our pilots got some motors from a company, and they put them in their quad, and we could not get that quad tuned. No matter what we do, it flew like garbage. So we used the motor test, and every motor brand new from the box was over 10,000, and they weren't like insanely powerful motors either. And so obviously those motors were unbalanced, and it made it so it didn't fly well. We replaced it with 4 new motors. They worked great. The pilot had 10 motors. I think out of 10, only 2 were below 5,000. So it can tell you, hey, out of the box, these motors are terrible. I mean, out of the box, your motors are all getting 10,000. There's an issue. If out of the box, one of our motors is getting 10,000 less, no, we're going to replace it if it's brand new. So, we do our best to balance them. We use the more expensive bearings. We use more expensive process with our motors. We want our motors to be super powerful and super smooth. But, 2308, 2900 kV is not going to score, 300 on the motor test. It's probably looking at, 1500, which is still really good for that amount of power. So that's what the motor test is there for. It's more for diagnosis, not to worry if my motors are more quiet than others. Like, I mean, a lot less powerful Lumineer motors do really well in the motor test because they got really good bearings and they're not as powerful. But, you know, other brands, the same power will do worse because the bearings or the balance of the motors aren't quite as good as, you know, those motors. So, you know, not all motors are created equally. Not all motors make the same amount of power. So keep that in mind. The Revolt can plug into essentially any ESC it uses that type of connector. If you can pull the pins out of our connector and put it into their connector, it will connect to it. So, you know, we recommend getting the Bolt. Again, if it gets damaged, it's $40. It's the most powerful ESC in the market. It's very smooth. But if you, for some reason, you know, are bolt shy and you don't think our new Bolt's going to do well, or if it's not going to fit in your frame, again, buy another ESC. Or if you have ESCs already that have that connector on them, you know, buy the new Revolt. You just plug it right in. The 5-volt BSC is a 3-amp 5-volt BEC. We've had no issues with it. I can say with a straight face, we have never in-house had a quad that I built with a bolt that failed. I've never had a bolt that failed with a quad my son's built. Kalen had one and one that was a little wonky, but other than that, all of them were great. We've had other people do builds and we've seen problems with them and they've died. But built right, the bolt, the BEC is awesome. Everything's awesome. Again, I think some guys are confused because what happens is they feel the voltage regulators on them and they get really hot and they assume that's what went bad on their board. But that's not what went bad on the board. If the CPU shorts out, it makes a short, so the voltage regulator is shorting, so that's causing a lot of heat. So usually when your BECs get hot, that's something else is shorting, not the BEC itself. We put a bigger BEC on this, so you're less likely to have to worry about it. But there should be no issues with anything that's on the voltage regulator here. Is amazing. I'm not sure exactly what the connector is. I couldn't tell you exactly offhand. But it's the standard connector that other ESCs use too. It's just maybe a little bigger version. I'd have to check exactly which one it is because we've tried a few different ones, so I couldn't tell you for sure what one the exact one it settled on. Let me see if there's any other questions. So flight modes. We talked about getting rid of brain drain mode. Some people liked it, so we're keeping it. So the new modes we're putting in, we're going to name them something different. Brain drain doesn't like his own mode. That's why we're talking about getting rid of it. But too bad. I guess he's going to have to use a new mode and name for somewhere else or something else. BAL Holly 32 does work on race flight. Someone just asked that. It just can't update because it's an encrypted updater. There's just absolutely no way we can update it without doing some serial pass-through. The whole point of race flight is to get rid of drivers. We use the HID driver that the mouse and the keyboard uses, so you don't need any drivers. You don't need anything special. You don't need DFU mode to update. You never need to click that button. You never need to jumper it. I mean, that is the tenet of race flight, to make it as easy as possible. So the idea that you have to use a separate program and a stupid serial driver that the computer doesn't come with is ridiculous to us. So you know, BL Heli 32 will fly well. We're adding, as he adds commands to change settings, we're adding them into him, so some of the wizards work. But basically the update, there's just no way to work. There's no way for us to even detect if BL Heli 32 is on there because it's not two-way communication, which again boggles our mind. If you're going to make a next-gen ESC, why don't you go all the way? But it will work. And some people like the way it flies better. To be honest, you put these capacitors on this Bolt, I bet you I can show multiple people and no one knows the difference. Something else to talk about ESCs, you know, none of them are outputting at 32 kilohertz. They're inputting at 32 kilohertz, but they're not outputting at 32 kilohertz. Even the BL Heli 32 doesn't output at 32 kilohertz. That seems ridiculous to us. There's going to be some aliasing there. So that's one of the things we plan to fix in the future as well. Right now, unfortunately, there's nothing on the market that I know of that can output at 32 kilohertz. It would be nice to have those in sync or a multiplier. So if it was 64 kilohertz, it would be okay. We wouldn't have any aliasing. The Bolt failure one, I mean, like, none of the Bolts have had failures that weren't caused by external stuff as far as we can tell. We can't get every Bolt out there, but most failures are caused by overheating the components or solder being thrown on there or one of the components shorting out. So if your Bolt's working really well right now, it's great. Don't worry about it. It's going to fly the same. This is, again, just aimed at making the failure rate lower. So if you replace your old Bolt because you're going to crash, it's going to come with the new Bolt. It's going to make the failure rate better, and it's going to make the build faster. I personally do not like soldering. It used to be fun, but I do it so much now. If I could plug in a few plugs and be done, that's what I want to do. On these connectors, one thing I do recommend, put a little drop of hot glue on the connector once you plug it in. That'll help keep it from dislodging. It's easy to just kind of flake off if you have a problem. What is the difference between the race flight Bolt and the race flight millivolt? So the millivolt is our mini flight controller, our 20 by 20 flight controller. The Bolt is our bigger ESC. The millivolt and the Spark are the ESC flight controller combo for 20 by 20. And the Bolt and the Revolt are the ones for 36 by 36 mounts. The millivolt right now can handle like, I don't know, 20 amps a channel, no problem. Our 2205 motors, 2600 kV motors work fine on the millivolt. I'm gonna do another live stream to show you a trick you can do to make your millivolt have a lot more power. But with something we're releasing soon, this week actually, but it works really good together. Anything over 2205s, you need the Bolt. It's, you know, don't even try it with other ones. I mean, some people might, but I don't recommend it. Are there instructions on how to use BL-Heli32 ESCs with the Revolt? We'll come out with I'll do a video with the new betas that support it better to show you how to use BL-Heli32 better. But essentially, just use Multishot BL-Heli32. It flies great. You can use Dshot, but Dshot, again, you know, you guys, the idea behind digital program is great. On paper, that sounds like what you want to do, but Dshot is very, very intensive. We're messing with some next generation code to make it less intensive. But the bottom line is it uses a ton of DMAs on the board. It uses, I mean, a ton of interrupts, I guess is what I want to say. So you know, you're using 4 of them. You're kind of screwing yourself over. DMAs. Yeah, DMAs. So it's very resource intensive flight controller. We can do Dshot 1200. As far as we know, we're the only F4 that does Dshot 1200. We've checked it on the oscilloscope. The signal is perfect. With BL-Heli32, Dshot 1200 does work. We don't have an issue. But it's resource intensive for the ESC. It's resource intensive for the flight controller. So we find it's more likely to have noise, and it's more likely to desync when you're using it because of that. Because it's lots and lots of teeny little packets. And then, like I was talking about, the capacitors, every time something switches, it's trying to give voltage to it. Well, when you're switching power constantly, that many times a second, so I don't have the specs in Dshot in front of me, but I think it's something like 16 times per cycle, so 32,000 times 16, or if it's something around those lines. That's how many times a second it is switching power on and off, because that's essentially what the signal is. It is a 3-volt pulse. So these ESCs, the caps and everything are working overtime, so it makes it way more prone for one of those to have an error and to skip a packet. And there's really no retry abilities in Dshot, even though it was originally pitched that way. So you're just losing packets, which is causing noise or is causing desync. So we still right now recommend Multishot. When we get to gigahertz speed or megahertz speeds, which is coming, there's going to be a new protocol that's going to work way better. Right now, we still stand by Multishot's the best protocol in these ESCs because analog signals are less prone to have problems with noise, is the bottom line. They don't spike the power near as much. You're not, instead of 32,000 times 16 a second, it's 32,000 times a second. They maintain the power during that time, so there's less spikes, less noise, less issues. Are there certain areas on the Bolt you should not code? I mean, when you're done soldering it, code everything. It doesn't matter. You can buy conformal coding. You can coat your existing Bolt. You can coat your Revolts. It's starting to get winter in some areas, so it's a good idea to conformal coat. You know, if you crash and hit some, you know, water or something, it's a good idea to do that. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Hopefully I won't miss any. I'm checking all the chats. So I don't even know if there's any BL-Heli32 ESCs that use the connector too, but if they are, they'll work. So I know Chris Simpson said, I mean, this is a good point, Dshot is basically software serial. And we all know software serial is not reliable. So we're looking to get basically, like he said, hardware serial. What's funny is our technology we have coming through ESC, we're pretty sure we can make it even compatible with Betaflight at megahertz speeds. So something's coming soon for that without even needing to use a new port. The new Bolt uses the existing firmware. The firmware hasn't changed that much, but we do change it, modify it for turtle mode and stuff. I know, like, for example, some people have tried Koopa mode, which is our turtle mode, and have said it's not worked well with their ESCs and stuff. I think SpeedX ESCs have an issue negotiating into Dshot. We don't know why that is. We haven't really analyzed it, but probably something along the lines of maybe capacitors on it or something that are causing issues. I don't know. We it's not we analyze them. So if you have a hard time switching to turtle mode, like all your props don't switch or everything else, your ESC could be causing it too. I will tell you, we've tested our motors with our Bolt ESC, and I've flipped 100 times in a row and not had a burned up motor or not had it fail flipping at all. So all ESCs aren't created equal for that, and all motors aren't created equal for that. So keep that in mind. Worn out motors might fry if you're using it or something, and some ESCs don't put out enough power. Some motors don't put out enough power. There's a lot of variables going into this. We were against it from the beginning. We didn't want to implement it because we know it could potentially cause some damage to hardware. But the pilots spoke. They really wanted it. They didn't care if it potentially could cause damage if it meant they could win a race. And I think Gil won second this year at the MultiGP Nationals because of it. So it's a good implementation. It's a good thing, but just be aware it's not foolproof. Like, you're still spinning props that potentially could be caught, and we've changed it so you can spin as little as one motor now with the latest stuff. But there's still a potential that it could burn up stuff, or it's just not going to work as well. Ours is fully automatic. When is the Bolt not going to be back ordered? Most of the orders were actually filling, so if you place the Bolt order, it's probably coming out. We're saying back ordered because we haven't filled every single order yet, and we want to make sure that we get everyone's out that we've been ordered before we put it to in stock. But actually, I think we're caught up as of today. I have to check, but all our orders should be caught up because we were waiting for these new ones. We let the older ones trickle out, and then we were waiting for the new ones to come in. So we didn't even order new of the old ones because we know this one was coming. So we got a little backed up for a week or two, and now we're all caught up. When does the OSD come in? We had talked about that earlier, but we do have a deluxe version of the new Revolt coming that has a lot of other changes on it too. It's going to be slightly more expensive, but it will have the OSD. So this one's still going to be one of the main ones we use because it's more simple. It has like a completely flat surface. It works great. It's great for racing. It's great for every day. But if you want the OSD and some other things we're adding, there's going to be another version coming. We've been concentrating on the flight code right now. We haven't been concentrating on the OSD code, but the OSD code is to the point where it's almost ready, and we're testing it. And once we know it's tested and works well, and once we know we've tested and the hardware works well, we're going to release that as well right now. But anyone with this can get an OSD. The Piggy OSD works amazing with race flight. It gives you the full OSD abilities. It goes on the back of your camera. There's other minimum OSDs that work. We have a custom firmware for the minimum OSD. It basically makes it a dumb terminal and lets us do whatever the heck we want with it. So any feature you can get on our upcoming OSD, you can get right now by just getting a minimum OSD and putting it on there. So that's as soon as everything's working really great, it should work well. Someone says their SpeedX takes a few seconds for all four to switch, but it has always worked. So maybe that's the problem. The SpeedX just needs more time to switch. So maybe if you're having problems, give it a little more time before it flips. You can run a Dshot, which doesn't have that delay, but again, we don't like the way Dshot flies as well. So that is an option though. Maybe in a race you're worried about the delay. Maybe it's better to run Dshot. The LEDs mean different stuff. Someone's asking about a problem with theirs. I suggest you contact support if it's not working well. Contact Raceflight's page and see. That's probably the best bet for that. Let me see. Someone said conformal coating they've seen damaging gyros. I don't know that it does. I know the gyros say never get epoxy anywhere near them. So I'm assuming if you don't use epoxy based conformal coating, it should be okay. We haven't done enough testing to conformal coat the Revolt. If we find it's necessary, we will, but most of the damage has always been the bolt, so we think conformal coating the bolt's probably all it's really needed, but who knows, maybe we will end up doing it. Let me see if there's any other questions. Does motor direction work with 32-bit? On the latest versions of Raceflight, it will. But unfortunately, we still can't change all settings through it because there's a limited amount of Dshot commands. But anything they support, we're going to be supporting in BLA32. Koopa does work with Multishot. Someone asked about that. So I guess that summarizes the changes. I mean, basically they're looking at a 50 amp bolt, no problem. 50 amps per channel, 200 amps should be no issues. 6S works great, conformal coded. Has a connection. Put TVS diodes on the Revolt, new connector on the Revolt, bigger regulator on the Revolt. Has bigger caps on it, bigger caps it comes with. That kind of summarizes it. If I don't see any other questions, I think we're going to call this live stream to an end. As someone asked, is there ever a Revolt with a PDB build-in coming? No, and the reason why is because we want the next-gen technology is going to require all CPUs on an ESC to communicate. That's how we're going to make everything work flawlessly. So individual ESCs, it's just not feasible. Long wires communicating at megahertz speeds, not a good idea. Our goal is to make these ESCs, 4-in-1 ESCs, as bulletproof. It's the future as possible. I know some people still like individual ESCs, but we're going to keep at this until we can make as bulletproof a 4-in-1 ESC as possible. New firmware is going to help with that. Some other things are going to help with that. But the future is 4-in-1s. It's the only way these 4 ESCs communicate fast enough to do some of the next generation stuff, like eliminate tuning completely. That is on the table. That's coming soon. There's going to be no need to ever tune a quad. The PID section is going away. But we need the next gen ESCs with next gen technology, next gen God, I can't even think, telemetry to do that. Someone asked, can they run Crossfire and the PDOSD at the same time? Yeah, and telemetry and everything. Yeah, there's plenty of orts. You can do that. If you need help doing that, let us know, and we can go over it and see what's not working. We're gonna update all our basically all our wiki with new articles. We're gonna have new Revolt FC is gonna be updated, make it a little better. We're putting out more information. We're trying to get more documentation up. We're integrating all the documentation into the configurator right now. I don't know if you guys have noticed in the latest ones, but there's going to be little help buttons with every single thing, explaining everything. There's going to be documentation in it. There's going to be videos that are linked in it. I mean, we're trying to make this as easy as possible. That's always been the goal of race flights, to be as easy as possible and also fly the best. So, that's what we're working towards. And, we have to make decisions on what we work on before other things. The OSD is the last thing that we thought the most important, the least important thing. Betaflight has it. I know there's people using Betaflight just for the OSD. We all use our radios. The radio stuff works awesome, especially on Spectrum. And there's an external OSD. I mean, I'm running external OSDs on my quads that communicate with Raceflight. The full configurator is going to be rolled out with the external OSDs pretty soon here. And in the meantime, if you need voltage, you can use your radio, or you can use, built-in camera OSDs. There's all kinds of options. So that's why we haven't concentrated on that, but it is coming. I don't know if there's any other questions. It's not going to be a single MCU. It's going to be 4 MCUs all that communicate together. So it's basically like Borg from Star Trek, where they all communicate together and decide what you're going to do. Basically, we're going to let the ESC take care of desync control and yaw spins and all that kind of stuff. Not the flight controller won't have to do it. The flight controller will not have to process it as much, which is great because that means you can plug the ESC into Betaflight and it can handle it for that too. That's the future. You can plug it into D-Ronin and it should work. I mean, the theory behind it is that the ESC can be a lot smarter, and being a 4-in-1, going the 4-in-1 route. That's why we're forcing the 4-in-1. That's why everything's aimed towards the 4-in-1, because we know the 4-in-1 is the future. There's no way around it. It's less likely to be damaged in the center. It's less likely to have problems in the center. The weight distribution's better in the center, and they can all communicate. Are we going to make next-gen boards with Spectrum? Spectrum actually, reached out to us and asked about making a new flight control with them. That's all I can say. I mean, that's all. It's gone. But yeah, we're open to it as well, helping them make a new version too, and maybe hopefully a new version of ESCs and stuff. We're willing to work with just about anyone. So contact us, and if you want to work together with us on something, we're open to it. Just don't know if we have the time yet, but if we do and we can work out the details, we're happy to work with whoever. In closing, hopefully everyone, these fix all the problems everyone's had. Again, the hardware is not, the version 1 should fly as well as the version 3 of the Revolt. It's all about making things easier, making things less likely to break. That's what all these things have been. The gyro's been the same to the whole thing. The powers may have been a little more regulated, but add some capacitors can fix that. The version 1 bolt, even the beta bolt, should fly as well as these bolts if you're putting the capacitors on there. But we're trying to make it better and better. So don't feel like you have the old stuff, you're behind. If you really want to replace your old stuff with new stuff, use the replacement plan. We don't even care if it's damaged. We're going to make you drill a hole through it to make sure you're not using both. But we'll give you it for the replacement price no matter what. And I mean, if you don't have a bolt, it shouldn't burn up. I mean, just I covered this early in the live stream. Just be really careful when soldering. Cover it with tape. Maybe conformal coat it when you're done. The old bolt should work just as well. In closing, I want to recommend everyone use Kester solder. I can't stress that enough. It's going to make things a lot better for you if you use Kester solder. Be careful when you're soldering things. Cover with masking tape. If you have the older stuff, it's even more important. The newer stuff we've conformal coated to make it less likely to have problems. We have people with running like 20 bolts with 0 issues. So, as far as we can see, it depends on the person installing it. It depends on their luck maybe, or where they fly, or if they're flying in wet grass. I don't know. I can tell you we haven't had issues with the old bolts, but any issues we've seen with people, I mean, we use examples of them. Like could go back, solder here, and then we had ones where basically little teeny wires were touching, or we had this one where solder's clearly on the CPU, and most of the problems we've seen have been this took a hit, this component broke, have been with things that have happened to the quad, or there's a solder ball in this one, or things that people have done. It's kind of weird. We're in a hobby where people have to solder things all the time, and this like no, there's no other hobby like this. Soldering is difficult. Again, solder splatters, balls go things. It's not your fault. But if you use like Kester solder, it's less likely to happen. If you cover it up with tape, it's less likely to happen. Just try and be careful as you can when you're doing stuff. And yeah, I mean, the version 2, they're gonna fly the same. We're not maxed out on CPU. So right now we don't need a faster CPU. Right now we don't need a different gyro. The gyro is amazing. So the current Revolts, all of them are always gonna fly as good as them. We're coming up with some more next generation things. We're adding GPS in. We're adding, return to home. We're adding like some, your video goes out, it'll just hover there until your video recovers. Some crazy stuff like that we're working on that's going to require a faster CPU. But right now, as it stands, anything we're doing does not really require faster CPU. And even the older boards, some of those things will still work, but maybe it goes down to 16 kilohertz to get the CPU back. I mean, we're trying to do some crazy stuff. And if we do crazy stuff, it's going to require more CPU. But the reason we haven't put a faster CPU on it right now is just been no need. And someone said, all they have is 5-inch quads and they run a millivolt. Just so you know, we run a millivolt with 2205s on 5-inch quads for super lightweight stuff. It does work well. So give that a try. We're also announcing, tomorrow I'm going to do another live stream announcing a 3-inch thing we have coming that we're pretty excited about. A super cheap quad that's 3-inch with premium components that we're going to do some spec racing locally and hopefully get some other clubs to adopt it as well. That we're really excited about. Someone asked, where can they find some good capacitors not out of the Raceflight shop because the shipping is more than the product itself cost? Panasonic FM series capacitors. I can't stress that enough. They're the way to go. Here, I will even put this up here. So use Panasonic FM series capacitors. If you search for FM series in whatever country you're in, you can get FM series Panasonic capacitors. They're available everywhere. These are guaranteed to be low ESR, and they are guaranteed to be the best capacitors we've ever tested. You don't need to get them from the Raceflight store because you can get them just about anywhere. But we do have them in the Raceflight store, and they're pretty cheap. You know, we don't mark them up very much compared to everyone else. So if you're in the U.S., I think it's a no-brainer to go to Raceway store. But if not, you can get them just about anywhere. You know, so I don't know if there's anything else, but I think that kind of summarizes everything. If you have any more questions, you know, feel free to message me direct or contact support. We're going to try and keep you informed. We're going to try to do better about doing these videos. We built this huge streaming setup with this fast computer and all this stuff, and it crashed yesterday, and it was crazy. But it seems like we got the kinks worked out today, so hopefully we can start doing more live streams and then also putting them to videos as well. Someone said they've heard about bad vibration with the Raceway Revolt with Bolt. I will tell you, you should not have any vibration issues. So if you do, contact us. Let's help troubleshoot it. Use the wires if you have the old one. Use this new connector if you have the new one. That helps minimize the vibrations. There is a YouTube stream that I did, not YouTube stream, a YouTube video that I did on a ultra low noise install. Use your capacitors. They are required. Do not even spin the motors without a capacitor on there, because they just do a very good job of filtering stuff. So make sure that when you're doing this, you're use at least one capacitor. It is just a safety thing. Use a smoke stopper too. That's something that we don't tell people often enough. I was telling someone about it yesterday. A smoke stopper you put between your battery and your quad. If there is a short at all, the light bulb lights up, it protects your quad. You can build a smoke stopper in 10 minutes with a light bulb you get from an auto parts store. Maybe we'll have to put up an article on it on our wiki, but it is a very good thing to have, and it's a very cheap thing to have that will prevent you from destroying your quad. So that's something. It's a very good idea to do. Yeah, someone's saying vibrations only when pinned. Pins works great for us, but honestly, if your screws are bent that go into your frame, it can cause noise. I mean, that's what we found has done it in the past. Someone's asking about Panasonic FR series. FR series are decent. We actually use an FM and an FR together. They're just not quite low ESR as the FM. So if you're going to buy one, buy the FM. If you have the FR, they should work too. Just because the ESR is a little lower on the FM, I think it's like 50% lower than the FR series overall. But one secret to getting a less resistance is the bigger the resistor, or the bigger the capacitor, the lower the resistance. So a 1000 FR capacitor will have the same resistance as a 470 FM. So if in doubt, go big. It's always going to be better. And that even applies to cheaper capacitors too. The bigger they are, the less the ESR. I have a meter that can measure that stuff. We bought a meter just to make sure we have the good stuff, and make sure all our ESCs pass and that kind of stuff. But if you get an FM series, you don't need to worry about that. And yeah, does Raceflight make minimum OSD easy to set up? Yes, because all you got to do is flash this firmware. You never touch your minimum OSD again. Everything's handled through Raceflight, so it's all automatic. So you flash it once, and you never deal with it again. So if you want OSD right away, go get a minimum OSD. You can get them for $5, probably even cheaper, probably $2 on AliExpress. Get one of the Piggy OSDs. You can get any of them. You can get the Betaflight one, or you can get the KISS one, because we flash custom firmware on them. So just get it, flash the new firmware on it. Make sure you get the little thing you need to flash it. I think it's like a little programmer. A lot of people already have one. And then you can run the OSD. You can run the OSD before the OSD board even comes out. So if you want an OSD like that, do that. Join the beta test channel on Slack, and that will get you the newest firmware. So as soon as the OSD hits, which is really soon here, then you can be testing along with everyone else before the boards even come out. See if there's any other questions. I don't want to miss any before I stop this. Someone asked to please update to YouTube. Yep, we're now streaming simultaneously to YouTube, so they're all getting stored there every time. The OSD, we'll come. I'll do a stream on how to set that up for everyone. So I'm not going to go over that now, but we'll do a separate one and show everyone how to do it, and then we'll make sure we archive it on YouTube as well. All right, well, I think that about covers it for everyone. I've been doing this for a while. If anyone needs to review it, should archive automatically to YouTube. You can jump through it or whatever else. Chris Simpson saying it's an FTDI to program. Yeah, that's the little programmer that you need to program the OSD in there, and they're really cheap. If you don't have one, ask your friend. Maybe he has one, because you only need to do it once. Once you flash it, it is done. So then from there on, Raceflight does everything, and you never need to update it again unless we find a bug in our software. So it's a good way to get the OSD before everyone else. About the instructions, there is an OSD channel on Slack. So if you want to do this before I make a video, join Slack, join the OSD channel. Someone asked if I play trumpet. Yeah, we have a ton of trumpets here. I used to play it a lot. My son plays it, so I don't know. There's like 20 different trumpets here. But yeah, we do. And then is there any other questions? So again, in closing, if anyone has any OSD questions, join the OSD channel on Slack. Join the beta test channel on Slack to get the latest software. We want everyone in one place where we can tell them if there's a bug in a beta we just released, or help them out if they have problems with the beta. That's really important to us. There's a reason we're not just giving them to everyone. We want to have interaction because we want to make things better. What is the point of releasing beta software if we can't communicate with the people running it? So that's why we're kind of forcing everyone to Slack. So, all right, well, it was good talking to everyone. If you have any questions, by all means, message me direct. I'm on Slack. I answer in beta tests all the time. I try and keep an eye on all the Facebook stuff. And in closing, I can't stress it enough. Buy yourself some Kester solder, and if you have any problems, give us contact.